Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, collaborative leaders. Welcome to the Collaborative Leaders Huddle. I'm Craig Ross, CEO of Verus Global, where we, of course, equip leaders to rapidly align collaborative teams. I was thinking about it this morning here in Southern California. It's more than that, actually. Verus Global has something in common with you, and that is every collaborative leader I've ever met understands that we may have business imperatives, fill that innovation pipeline, deliver products to markets faster, grow market share, what have you. But together we understand something, don't we? And that is that to deliver a business imperative, there's a human imperative. And that when employees are connected to purpose, one another, and their values, when we deliver on that human imperative, we deliver on a business imperative that far exceeds our expectations. And so Verus Global, we're excited to join you today for our Collaborative Leaders Huddle for a very special topic. This topic of meaning. I'm going to bring in my fellow colleague, some dear friends to support me in this effort. First and foremost, I would like to introduce the one and only Sherilyn Jane, my partner in this effort. Sherilyn, would you please introduce yourself and say a few words to our huddle?
Yes, hi everyone. So as you heard upon entry, we are recording, but please join the conversation in the chat. You can post your questions for Craig and Stacey. And if you'd like to ask a question anonymously, you can just send me a chat directly and I'll ask the question for you.
Yeah, and quit sending me those little chats that say, hey, you need Sherilyn to speak up more. I know that. Sherilyn's brilliant. And so we're going to continue to bring Sherilyn's voice into this. We were preparing for this conversation, and Sherilyn's bringing insights that are firing things in my mind. So can't wait, Sherilyn, to have you included in our conversation as well. With that, it's time to introduce the one and only Stacey Engle, founder of the Authority Lab. Complete transparency, a disclaimer, if you will. Stacey Engle at one point was I was a client of hers and went through what she calls the Authority Lab, profoundly impactful for me. This understanding that as human beings, we all have inherent authority, right? There's an authority that we have and possess, and the ability to demonstrate that with integrity, with grace. I think Stacey's the perfect guest for our topic today, but enough about what I think. Stacey, welcome to the Collaborative Leaders Huddle. Would you please say a few words about the impressive work that you do?
For sure. Thank you, Craig. And thanks. Yes, it was a fun time going through Authority Lab together. And really, Authority Lab is a process that helps you claim and have confidence around the impact you want to make in the world. Hence our question for today. But I work with teams, leaders, entrepreneurs around purpose, your authority, and how your leader brand, which, by the way, everyone is a leader, how your leader brand matters more than ever, because this kind of work, you can't ask anyone on your team to do if you're not willing to do it yourself. So I have the privilege of supporting lots of teams, leaders in this pursuit.
And talk about more than ever, Stacey, this big question that we have today, as everybody knows, Collaborative Leaders Huddle, this is live, it's unscripted. We're going to be asking our participants, our guests, those that are attending, to participate through the chat space. Let's go to that big question right now, Sherilyn. How do we find more meaning in our work? I was struck by some data that some 69 million people in 2021, just in the US, and I regret that we don't have numbers for the global, because we've got plenty of global participants today, but 69 million people in 2021 left their job. Now, there's a thought that, wow, they left for more pay. And according to Gallup, about a third of them did leave for more pay. But a wholly 2/3 of them left because, my words, they want more. According to Gallup, they're either dissatisfied with a toxic workplace, or they want more engagement. They want more meaning in their work. Stacey, let's answer the big question. How do you answer this question? How do we create more meaning in our work, Stacey?
Well, I'm excited for us to dive in because it is a juicy question. If I had to answer it, I would say two things. One, own your authority. Authority comes from the word auctor, which means author. to author your life, author your meaning. So it's stepping into that as number one, to find meaning, because it is an inside job. And then two, actually a daily audit, which I want to talk more about that. But this idea of your life and your work, it happens one day at a time. So doing an audit of how much meaning you have, how you're feeling, and some other exercises. But those two things are my
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So author my life and this daily audit. I'm looking forward to exploring what you mean by that. But I know plenty about audits. There's pressure to deliver the numbers. Yeah, that's the audit that I'm used to. I saw another statistic, this one by McKinsey. They said that 70% of people get purpose from their work. Their purpose is defined by their work. You know, I get the rich pursuit of creating meaning in my life and my work, but I confess I succumb to being attached to the number that I have to deliver. Is the company growing? Are we selling? Am I delivering on our mission? Are we delivering the promise to the customer? The list goes on and on. Give me some advice, Stacey. If I'm connected to the audit of the numbers that we deliver, what advice do you have for me to go further?
Well, my question would be, how is that working for you?
Okay.
Which is part of the question with the daily audit. How is this working for you? I mean, it's common to share a little bit about my story, which I think is rooted a lot in meaning. I was leading a company for a decade, and a lot of my identity was tied to that company. And that was actually part of the inception of creating Authority Lab, because I was no longer there. And it was this whole pursuit of, how am I attaching my meaning, my purpose, my own identity, which I think identity and work are very synonymous, especially in the US and in certain cultures. So yeah, my advice, I don't know, Craig, how is it working for you? And then we need to ask more questions, because we often find, and I know many leaders that I've worked with know intellectually that it's not working, right? It's not working for them to attach their purpose or their meaning to achieving goals. But on the other hand, it's that inside work of figuring out, where else can it come from? And why do you do it? And some of that, those juicy questions.
You say achieving goals, and I'm assuming that to those extrinsic goals, right? The goals of hitting numbers. You know, to answer your question, how's that working for me? Not very well. I find myself not sleeping well. I find myself suffering physical and emotional difficulties. I'll just put it that way. When I attach meaning to simply delivering numbers. My father gave me a gift in his final years about a decade ago. In a brief moment of clarity, he looked at me and said, there's so many things I wish I would have done. And that has been using the metaphor of passing a baton, saying, son, here's a lesson that I'm going to pass to you. So then let's go a little bit further with this audit that you talked about, daily audit. How do I resist the temptation of checking boxes to get my job done, to deliver the numbers? And how do I what's the audit you're talking about? How do I bring more meaning to that then?
Well, and when I say daily audit, one of my favorite quotes in just my life is by Annie Dillard. And it's, how you spend your day is how you spend your life. So it's that focus of every moment is building off of the other. The daily audit, I'm sure many leaders and people on the call have had some version of this, but it's going through an ideal day. So it's, how would you like to start your day? What is the composition of the day? Right? Who are you spending time with? What are you doing? Are you always going on a daily walk? Are you know, so write that ideal day out. And then rank how many of those ideal days do I have? And how far off am I? It's a simple exercise, but it's quite profound. And it's something that when you do it, we also change. we're constantly evolving humans. So we need to do this exercise at least annually, quarterly. You know, those habits can sneak in, or priorities deprioritized. So that's what I mean by a daily audit. It's essentially an ideal day, then compare it to your current day.
Stacey, is it okay to ask questions? This is Martin. I just joined a little bit late, so I'm not sure what the norm is on asking questions.
Hi,
Martin. Indeed. Let's hear it, Martin.
Okay, look, I found this astonishing. I'm just looking at the videos, and I think I see the majority of us sitting in our home offices instead of sitting in our regular kind of work offices.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, if you ask the question, how does your ideal day look like? Well, I can tell you, my ideal day would not take place in the home office, being detached from my team, and not giving the other person a pat on the back and having a coffee break and taking them out for a talk and building relationships. So I think it's an interesting concept, but I think we need to kind of take that concept, especially these days. And I don't know how you guys are impacted still by COVID, but we're still a bit impacted by COVID. And I think, at least I can talk for my organization, we still are, have heavy scars from, emotional scars and psychological scars from almost 2 years of predominantly being in the home office. So how do you take that concept that you shared into that kind of environment and say, so how would I create an ideal when I'm actually not at all in an ideal environment? Right.
It's a great question. And yes, we've been through a lot together as humanity, haven't we, in the last 2 years? The irony of it, right, is that someone's ideal day is being in the home office and not needing to go anywhere. So that's the ultimate challenge as leaders and companies, to set standards. But to answer your question directly, your ideal day, because this actually does happen often. I mean, some leaders, when I've taken them through this exercise, say, my ideal day isn't being at my job or working with this team. And then that's a whole conversation that needs to happen. But as far as if, for instance, you'd rather be networking with people, or there will always be circumstances that you can't control, but there are themes. So when I heard you, I heard that you'd really like to have social, personal time with someone with your team. Maybe you buy a digital gift card. There's, and you carve out that time, because I would ask you, Martin, if we did that exercise together, how much time are you carving out for some organic interaction with your team? So that's an example. It's not always going to be perfect, and that's part of the journey. And oftentimes a few small tweaks can make a huge impact.
Stacey, is there a component with this ideal day? I think you used the word once there, that perhaps I start with things that are under my control. And so, Martin, brilliant question. And so what's my ideal day given that I'm working remotely?
Right.
And perhaps there's that angle. Because my ideal day is floating through the Grand Canyon, but that's not how my life is set up to operate. So given I have work and responsibilities, so what's my ideal day in that context? Appreciate that. Mr. Joe Black, I saw a chat that you struck a chord there. Joe, do you want to, if you wouldn't mind taking yourself off mute and building on that comment, and even a question perhaps for Stacey or myself?
Yeah, the question, first of all, thanks for the forum, Craig and Stacey, appreciate it. You start this whole conversation off with this concept that people are finding that they're not finding the meaning in what they do. And I think the majority of the people that we know of that may be falling into that category are probably, with my gut, not the people on this call, on this conference, but we're the ones who actually create the environments that other people have to work in. And so for me, the question is, okay, if that is indeed the case, that people are leaving because they're not finding meaning in what they're doing, what do we as leaders do that helps create those environments where it makes it easier for people to actually find that meaning?
Brilliant. You're sparking some thoughts, Stacey.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I was reading research, which any that we reference, we can share after this call, because I don't want to misquote it, that actually there's been some research with the teams and this very question. And they're also saying it could be great recognition is needed. Our teammate and colleague, Carrie, and I were talking about this, but this idea of people, when they don't feel recognized, that's like a root cause that they've started to uncover with the Great Resignation. So it's not pay, it's not some other components. They don't feel recognized by their manager, by their company. And we all know with recognition programs that can, it needs to look different for your team members, and that's the challenge. But this idea of recognition and understanding how each of your team members wants to be recognized, I do think is an actionable way to it. It's a few layers down, but it's an actionable way to create an environment that people find meaning because they show up and they feel confident to do so.
Stacey, I'm struck by that comment there. I think we need to grasp that. This understanding that everybody wants to be perhaps recognized differently. Some publicly it's important, some it's privately one-on-one, some of them want a gift, a bonus, some of them it's a handwritten note. But at the core of all those, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Joe, to your point, we as leaders then are recognizing them as who they are as humans. I see you, I get you, you matter. Mm-hmm. Dr. Emily Smith in her work, The Power of Meaning, brilliant book, by the way, talks about leaders create places where people belong, which is actually the heart of an inclusive environment. I don't need to be included in every meeting when I feel as though I belong, I identify with this group or team. Thanks for rocking that, Joe Black. I appreciate it. Love your heart, man. Julia, I saw your hand. You go ahead, Sherilyn, please.
Well, not only recognition, but I think you can also help your team realize the impact that they have, because we all know that people want to be a part of something. They want to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And so helping them realize the impact that they have on the business or, within the team, I think that that's really powerful too.
Yeah, direct link, impact on the team, on where the organization is going, that creates meaning. Sherilyn, I appreciate that. Julia, I saw your hand up. I don't know if you were.
Oh, no, I was actually clapping. I was using one of the reaction emojis. I completely agree with the point about the recognition and having work feel fulfilling. That's kind of a key. People have had a time to kind of step back because they had to with COVID. Mm-hmm. They got to reevaluate, really what was important to them. And I think people are changing their priorities a little bit, but having meaningful work, having it feel like it's fulfilling, and also the recognition is kind of a balance.
It really is. It really is. And as I transition to Tom, I see your hand up, Tom. Your words, Julie, I want to underscore. There's a movement afoot. I'm seeing more and more of it. Perhaps you are as well. It used to be if we were engaged, if your workforce was engaged. I mean, who wants to get to the end of their career and say, hey, I was engaged? We want more. Julie is using the words inspired. I think you used the word fulfilled. And the research out there is really clear. This is from blah, 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 the book Time, Talent, Energy. This is Mankins and Garten in their research. They talk about the inspired employee is 2 times more productive than the engaged employee. And so Julia, your words matter. Love that. Fulfilling work. Tom, you had your hands up.
Yes, sir. First of all, it's good to see you after 13 years.
Indeed. Indeed. Good to see you.
It's been
Love
too
it.
long.
It's been too
But
long.
I appreciate the opportunity to participate, and I thought I would add something that I find quite unique and interesting from my perspective. I've been an executive recruiter now since I kind of retired from the packaging business after 40 years. And just recently, I have I think a good example of what Stacey was referring to in some way, because I have candidates for leadership positions in different packaging companies. And one recently shared with me, said, Tommy said, I'd like to talk to you more about the position, but I really want to learn more first about the hiring manager, the person I'm going to work for, and also their boss. And when you can provide me some detail surrounding those two individuals, I can get all the information I need about the company online. Then I'll share with you my resume and how I might fit into the organization. And I've really not had a candidate ask that level of detail regarding a company opportunity before, but it just reminds me of how important those elements have now become to people in the workplace. And, it's something we should have been doing for years and just haven't, and overlooked it and just assumed it was all going to be great and good. And it's not. And there's been kind of an awakening, if you will. And I think it's great for the environment of these positions. So that's it. That's it for me.
Tom, I appreciate that. Love that. Love that. Stacey, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that comment, Tom, and I agree. You're at the pulse of what I have been witnessing and on the front lines with as well, from the standpoint that what we say, anonymous brands are dead now. This idea that leadership can just stay in their office, or you can read something that's really glossy on the site, those days are pretty much over. So we need to invest in our leaders to be able to have the conversations, to have purpose and meaning in their own work, because that's something that candidate can sniff out really quickly. It's not even as much as the P&L or the opportunity for the resume. It's like, can I be myself here? Can I make an impact? Can I use my authority, my desires, my skills to make an impact with this person, with these people? It's no longer the days of leadership made these decisions. It's like, no, we know that it's Barbara and these people, and they're on Twitter. And anyway, so the landscape has changed. And I think one of the questions in the chat was just why now? And I'd love to dig more into that, Craig. But I think why now, you think about this great, with the pandemic, this great acceleration of technological adoption. It's a huge factor we don't talk about as much. Emerging technology entrepreneurs are talking about it all the time, of just now we're very likely to do certain things that 3 years ago we wouldn't spend as much time on video, on screens, et cetera. So this idea of the great acceleration with technology and this pursuit of, is this meaningful? The great resignation, those two factors, Tom, I believe mixed with what you're saying, are creating the massive shifts in the workplace that it's no longer it's never going back to how it was. And we all know that. So it's co-creation at this point. But I love that comment, Tom. It's really the core and heart of why authority, why purpose, whatever you want to call it.
Matters.
Mm-hmm.
Stacey, thank you for that. Tom, good to see you again. I'm going to transition to Cheryl Lynn. Cheryl Lynn, your thoughts or questions in the chat. As I do that, I want to remind everyone, for those of you who've been a part of previous huddles, at the end of this, the three of us will be sharing our what we call insights in an instant. So we're all targeting just one takeaway, one insight. Maybe it's a reminder, maybe it's something new that we're going to further operationalize in our work together. We're going to ask you to participate with that as well. I know I'm getting some nuggets, this idea of defining my ideal day with what I can control. I'm struck by Joe Black, your comments there, and there's a body of research out there that's very clear on this. We experience more meaning in our work when we help others create meaning in theirs. There's a direct link in that. Joe, thanks for reminding me of that. Sherilyn, your thoughts or what you're seeing there in terms of questions?
Yeah, so I think I'd love to dive deeper into why now. Arena Hooks has asked that question. Yeah, why now? Why is this so important?
Yeah, and so where does that take you, Stacey, in terms of why now? What are your initial thoughts there?
Why not? I think we've had, there's been a crisis of lack of meaning, but it hasn't been illuminated. I think just what I was referencing before, there's reasons, right? Macro, pandemic, the great acceleration, there's more access to jobs than ever. If you talk, I love the comment about my 18-year-old. If you look at, the top 5 careers right now that high schoolers want, number 3 is being a YouTuber. The world is shifting, and I think why now there's more access to being able to make money. And if you just associated your work with, I need to do work to make money, then it inherently becomes an existential question.
Yeah. There's also, of course, there's important information out there around, we've never had so much technology to connect as humans. Mm-hmm. And yet depression is way up. Mental illness is up. Thank goodness we're talking about that more. We need to do even more. Suicides. There's some really sad components around this acceleration of digital technology, if you will. And so why now? I think the world is begging us, humanity, and saying, create workplaces where, would Maslow say, we all want to be self-actualized. I'm going to use Julia's comment around fulfilled, and we know there's a direct link between that business imperative and the human imperative. And so if that's the silver lining, if that's the gift in the tragedy, and the tragedies, plural, that we're experiencing as a world right now, then let's seize the moment. And let's start with ourselves, Stacey, to your point. Let's start with ourselves in creating more meaning in our work. And then doing so, as Joe's reminding us, for others. And that'll deliver the business imperative without doubt.
Hey, Craig, can I make a comment relative to that? Why now? I think there's 2 things that are influencing that. One, I think with the pandemic and the push to the home environment, people who used to be stuck in a certain type of job were giving a new type of flexibility that they had never tasted before. Mm-hmm. And they're like, I like this, right? So their whole awareness of what work can be like got shifted because it got forced to be in another mode. And I think the second one is just the sheer issue of mortality. I think as people recognize, hey, life is short. And before, maybe I just plodded along saying, okay, tomorrow I'll get it. And now you're facing a situation where, I may not live. What have I done? What am I doing? I do think that those 2 things really have caused people's minds to shift dramatically about the workplace.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to hold us accountable, Stacey. I'm coming to you with a question. And I'll preface it by sharing, I want to hold us accountable here on this huddle around making sure we're all walking away with actionable things we can do. We've hit a couple of them. I've highlighted them. I'd like to offer this one as well and get your thoughts, Stacey. This idea of as a leader, do I know what fulfills those for whom I have, I'll just use this expression, authority over, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I have positional authority. I also have different types of authority. You taught me this. I've got, I've got, I walk into the room and I've got some privilege just being a white male. and having that awareness. What am I doing with that in service to others? Is it too much for leaders to ask an employee, hey, what fulfills you? Or are you fulfilled in your work? That can feel scary. I mean, am I opening up a box I don't want to open, Stacey? Talk about me about using my authority in some way like that. Does that resonate, or do you have counsel?
It resonates. And well, first of all, you're an amazing leader and you do ask that question. So, I mean, I know a lot of people on this call know you, and we have other visitors who don't, but I think that if you're uncomfortable asking your team, what fulfills you at work? Are you fulfilled? That's a tell. That's a symptom of you not knowing if you are. So it starts with you as a leader. That's my take on that, Craig. So I think that there's that piece, and just all of the great comments about why now. The invitation to bring your humanity and your stories has been given. If you choose not to, your team notices, whether they tell you or not. So I mean, I would go as far, Craig, to say you have to ask that question in 2022 on April 28th or 29th, depending on where you are in the world.
Okay, all right. Okay, I get it, Stacey, but let's just play this out for a moment. To Joe's point, I doubt we have anybody in the huddle here today that thinks like this, but we know there are people in our world that might say, oh, come on, Stacey, I'm not here running a nonprofit. We're not here just to make sure employees feel good. We've got to deliver a number. I've got responsibilities to shareholders. I mean, let's get real here, Stacey. If I have to are you telling me to prioritize an employee's fulfillment versus profitability? Come on, Stacey, get real.
I would just start with the same question. How is that working for you?
Okay.
Because from my experience, the leaders who resist this are having results that they do not want. The very results with profitability or speed to market, executing on projects, having transparency with the team, those things aren't happening. And you can kind of link it back. This is not a black and white thing, Craig. I think this is the biggest challenge of leadership. One of the quotes that I love is, people support the world they create.
Yeah.
Are you inviting them to create it together? You don't have to have all the answers. You actually don't even need to have, I share from an authority perspective that I think you should know where you derive some of your meaning, but you don't even have to know that. You can share with them, I'm struggling with this as well.
Wow. Yeah, cool.
How are you thinking about it? What do you think, Greg? How does that sit with you as the answer?
No, it resonates. I love that. And as I transition to JT here, I'll say, I think, we all know that a culture in an organization will always rise to the level of your most talented individuals. And I've seen a lot of leaders, I used to make the mistakes of saying, well, can't get rid of that person. They're too talented. But the way they contribute to culture, that's typically the cap of your culture. And what we're seeing, Stacey, is a movement of really talented people who get what the folks in this huddle know, is that they want more. They want a fulfilling, meaningful experience. And when your top talent is looking for that, woo, I mean, I get chills. JT, talk to us, man.
Yeah, so kind of talking about this idea of fulfillment versus shareholders and things like that. So I primarily work in the nonprofit world, but within that, I focus on working with professionals who are under those pressures. So I work with a lot of upper level management and business leaders who are having to answer and think through those kinds of questions. And one of the things that came up in a discussion a couple months ago was this Harvard case study on a business that kind of caught a whole bunch of media attention, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago. where this CEO basically reduced his salary by a significant margin to ensure that the minimum wage for all of his employments was $70,000 a year. And what the reason I bring that up is I think part of fulfillment is economic stability and viability of the position somebody is working in. And I think a lot of times, especially as men and women begin to develop families, whatever that looks like, there is this question of, am I doing what I love, but also is it economically viable for the stage of life I'm moving into? And I think, unfortunately, what I've seen kind of across the board in the work that I'm doing is that there are a lot of companies who misunderstand the relationship between their employees' productivity and the economic viability of the position they're working in. If somebody's job is economically stable enough for them to be able to provide for their family, not only are they going to be an engaged worker, but there's a greater chance they're going to find fulfillment in the work that they're doing, which is then going to create an easier access point for them to become an inspired worker, kind of leaning on a lot of the things I've heard since I got into the call. Just throwing that out there.
JT, I'm going to transition to Stacey, get her thoughts on that. I want to share that you just made me a better leader, because I can go to an employee and say, are you fulfilled? What fulfills you in your work? Being mindful that this isn't a binary topic. There's a lot of variables, and the financial well-being of an employee is critical. It's an important part of that mix. Thank you, JT. Virtual knuckles to you. Stacey, your thoughts on what JT
shared? I echo what you said, from the standpoint of, we're talking definitely about one lens of meaning and purpose, which can often be, I mean, when I've posted some things around that, this topic of socioeconomic stability, that it's a privilege, that it's a privilege to even think about your purpose if you don't have other Maslow hierarchy of needs fulfilled. So I totally hear you, JT. Also, Dan Price is the CEO you're referencing, and I know him, and he's like 5 miles north of where I live in Seattle. So Gravity Payments is the company. So I am familiar. I think it's important for this awakening to also include this conversation, which obviously we're not getting into in 50 minutes, but I think that's a really important one that should be talked about on the leadership level, to your point, JT. And also I've seen some comments around mission, vision, values. It's really hard to focus on some of those big ideals if you can't provide for your family or yourself.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important highlight.
Thank you, Stacey. RK Narayanan, you're up.
Oh, thanks, Craig. It's a fantastic discussion. I'm really enjoying it. And to answer Martin's question, I've been working from my office since September 2020, actually. It's been fun, and I take off and work from home whenever I want to. So that's also a good pleasure. That was never an option before pandemic. So that's that's a freedom. So as I indicated in the comments, I am recently promoted. So I feel quite empowered and also find more meaning because of that recognition. But lately, some leaders have been commenting that they see a more aggressive self of me and who is finding lots of defects in the service we provide. So I want to know how I should be balancing doing the right thing, which I feel very empowered to do, at the same time not being perceived as questioning authority, leadership, everything.
Wow, love the transparency, the vulnerability, RK. Thank you. Stacey?
Wow, I think we've all experienced a moment, like you're essentially asking the question, do I say something and act a certain way, or do I stay more silent, not stepping into that? You're nodding your head. I see you. At the very core of this topic of meaning, and finding fulfillment in work. I think diving into how you are going to do that, and I don't have the answer for you, but of course, as leaders, you were promoted for reasons would be the ideal interpretation of that, and they want to hear from you. And what you're talking about from other leaders commenting on you, that's a whole other level and new phase of your leadership to think about and to dive into what's required of you. How can you be supported? Because that's not an easy stage. And I'm processing a little with you, as I'm sure you can tell, because it's not easy. So asking you questions, but from the gifts that you have to give to the world, I think anytime we don't speak up and we don't share our truths, of course, that needs to be done in a respectful and inclusive manner. But when we don't step in, the world is given less. We're becoming smaller. So my main, as I'm processing, but as my main point, continuing to harness your own thoughts, authority in this situation and bringing people along. Once again, people support the world they create. How can you have them part of this co-creation with you? But I don't like when leaders choose to act smaller for other people. And that's how I interpret. Craig, what is your take? What do you think?
Well, I'm struck by RK's question, and yeah. I think it's really critical. You know, I'll rely on research again, the study around inspired leaders, and they found 33 different characteristics, and the one that inspired leaders had most in common, you know, we tend to think about, well, energized, you know, getting other people out of their seats, blah, blah, blah. The one trait they found most in common is that inspired leaders are centered.
Yeah.
And so my counsel to RK and Ariana, and thank you for asking. I think it's what experience do we want to have? I want to go back to Stacey's counsel around auditing. And then what experience do I want to have as I work here and move through this? And most of the inspired collaborative leaders I know, the experience they want to have, there's an integrity to their values. There's a groundedness in who they are. And that, when I see leaders operate from that space, it's amazing how they call other people to that same path. Thank you, RK, for demonstrating courage. Before we shift to Martin for one more question,
yes,
we're gearing down. This is the fastest 50 minutes in the history of humankind, by the way. RK, did you have a follow-up thought on that real quick?
I'm fine. Thank you for the answer.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for bringing it up.
I actually want to get to an anonymous question that came in a little earlier before we go
Hang
to
out,
Martin.
Martin, for just a second. Go for it, Sharon.
Awesome. So there's a saying, work hard and play hard, but it seems like it's very challenging for employees to truly step away and play hard. For example, spending time with family without being expected to check into work. What is the best way to navigate such issues?
Okay, let's solve that in 1 minute. And then
maybe that's our next Collaborative Leaders Huddle topic.
It's a big question. Stacey, briefly, your thoughts on that before we hear from Martin.
Understand what your ideal is, and then have the conversation with your direct leader or teams, whoever is required to make that happen. But you need to do the work to understand your boundaries, because that is the number one issue, I think, in this issue, which is hard because we want to blame it on others or we want to blame it on external components. And that's the hardest part. So getting super clear about what you need and then engaging in the conversation.
I'm reminded that there is a difference between meaning and happiness. And those that have and operate with more meaning are doing things that are important, but it might not be very enjoyable. I'm the father of 4 amazing kids, and I wish they were all angels all the time. It doesn't work that way, but it's very meaningful work. I'm not always happy while I'm doing it. The business is tough issues, tough challenges, but it's meaningful. Not always happy. Martin, real quickly.
Yeah, I actually didn't have a question. I had a comment regarding RK's question, and I wanted to share an experience. I was actually hearing similar comments some time ago. So it's already probably 20 years ago when I had my real kind of first promotion and I had people accountability. And a very experienced leader told me, Martin, you're behaving very aggressively. And the person made me scratch my head and say, really? And kind of what I found out, when I, in the process of scratching my head over a period of time, he was right. And why was he right? He was right because, I wanted this. I wanted that accountability. I wanted to have that power. I wanted to have that authority. And I probably used/abused that authority as I had to learn to become a leader. And what I probably and I'm not saying this is your case, I'm just offering that thought, right? And so I actually had to learn how to use that authority and how to use that position in the most meaningful way and in the most effective way, so that people actually would feel inspired and not managed or directed, but not really led. So just wanted to offer that thought.
Martin, I love how you roll. Thanks for adding this understanding. For me, you're triggering the key, is awareness and using feedback as it relates to how we're demonstrating using our authority. And in this case, as it relates to creating meaning. We're going to do the difficult task of bringing this to a close. And to do that, a few words, but I'd like to encourage everyone to be thinking about what's your insight in an instant. What's your number one takeaway? We'd like to see that in the chat space. We'll be hearing from Sherilyn and Stacey in a moment. I would like to remind everyone that at Verus Global, our flagship program, Virtual Pathways Solution, several of you have participated in that. You know the power behind that in delivering and achieving the human imperative so we can more effectively deliver on that business imperative, and along the way, making sure our families don't get our leftovers. Very proud to be partnered with a team that delivers that. Additional resources for you across the board. There's even more. You find them on the website and so forth. And of course, the work of Stacey Engle and Authority Lab. I encourage you to check that out and continue this conversation around authority. With that, Sherilyn, Jane, what's your insight in an instant? The rest of us, if you're so inclined, love to see it in the chat space. Sherilyn, your insight in an instant today.
I'm not sure that I can pick one, honestly. This has been one of the best conversations. One comment that just got in the chat, your career is a marathon, not a sprint, and your company should want you to have a long career. And that speaks to, being able to totally disconnect and recharge. And I think that that's really important. I think that that's a great comment.
Mm-hmm. Sherilyn, I appreciate that. That resonates for me as well. My insight in an instant, I'm inspired by Stacey's words around this audit, and then taking a little bit deeper around, wow, audit, what's my ideal day look like? And for me, what can I control? And therefore, what would it be ideally? Being mindful of that, the question, the mind goes towards the questions and the focus. I'm gonna walk away with that. Stacey, your insight in an instant today.
I echo Sherilyn's. I think the insight is we're all in it together, this pursuit of meaning. And the more that we can share our experiences with each other, the more that we most likely will be fulfilled in what we're doing.
A beautiful close. We are all in this together. Thank you, everybody. Collaborative leaders. We'll look forward to seeing you in a future Collaborative Leaders Huddle. Remember, leadership matters, but only teams deliver. Nicely done, everybody. Thanks for making a difference in the world.
Thank you.
See you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.